So, welcome to part 2 of the Kings of War Goblin Army review and tactics. And let's just kick off straight with monsters. There's 3 choices here, slashers, giants and mincers. Let's start with the mincer.
Gay!
So this thing is essentially a battering ram, and with that thunderous 3, it's designed to march up the board with your line and then charge out and smash into the front of the units, wounding them on 2s. It's also got the big shield rule, which is really nice thing about this. You park that maybe in front of your units and then use that as like a blocker, or maybe like treat it as a bit of chaff. And also it really disincentivizes things shooting it, because you don't want to be shooting things that are defense 6. It's just quite demoralizing. It does have low nerve though, 9-11. Which means that it does only need to take 1 or 2 wounds, and you've got the chance of it wavering, which is a bit of an issue. But I think I quite like these. I think for 80 points, they do fulfill a decent role. Let's think about its offensive capabilities. You charge in d6 plus 6 attacks hitting on 4s. You can probably expect between about 3 and 5 wounds from this. Say 5, maybe more if you're rolling really well. And you get that brutal. They're not going to break things on their own, realistically, but if you can accompany charge, get off a double charge with this as well, and then get that brutal for the +1 to nerve, then you've got a chance of breaking things. I think the main issue I've got with mincers, though, is the fact they are only speed 5, which is pretty low. You're not going to outcharge anything else, really, unless you're playing dwarfs, obviously. If you're playing dwarfs, take 3 of these, that would be amazing. And then the final nail in the coffin is that mincers do suffer from yellow-bellied, which is a pretty big flaw, I reckon, in the design of this unit, because it's specifically designed to charge things, and yet it suffers from yellow-bellied, which means it doesn't want to charge things. So, yeah, at 80 points, definitely worth a punt, and they can be effective, but I'm not a huge fan, and I don't tend to field them. So we're on to giants next, and I'm a big fan of giants. I always field at least 1, and more recently I've been fielding 2. They're brilliant, but pretty good offensively, I should say, because obviously they're crushing strength 3, so they're wounding everything on 2s. But they don't have many attacks, and their attacks can be somewhat unreliable because of the d6 plus 6. So if you roll a 1, you're not putting out much wounds. But you can pretty much consistently rely on these guys to do 4 wounds offensively, like up to 6 if you're rolling well. So they're not offensively devastating, so to speak, but their strength really is in defense, because they got a huge nerve of 17, 19. And not only that, but they've got fury. So in combat, even if you get to up to 17, 18 on these guys, they're still going to countercharge you, which is really good. And sometimes when you play Kings of War, you just need something that's going to take a charge, right? You need to put something out there and say, you can charge this, and it's okay. And giants are very good at that. Normally that role would kind of be filled by something like a horde of infantry, but giants, they can do that, and they can do it better because they can hit back and wound. And not only that, but they've got the much smaller base size, and they've got speed 7 instead of speed 5. So they fulfill the role of a horde of infantry, but they just do it way better. And Strider as well is obviously another huge bonus, meaning you don't have to worry about terrain on the charge. So yeah, giants, really big asset to the Goblin army. If you want to field a combat style army, or if you, anything like that, then definitely include giants. They are brilliant. So onto the slasher, and a very similar unit really. Speed 7, melee attack 4, defense 5, with crushing 2 and thunderous 1. So very similar to the giant, except coming in at 165 points. So it is a lot cheaper. Interestingly, it comes with an option to mount a small sharp stick thrower on it, which is just a range weapon. It is only a 10-point upgrade, but you get 2 range attacks, hitting on 5s with piercing 2. Now, unlike the sharp stick thrower, these attacks aren't actually blast, so it's just 2 straight up range attacks. And hitting on 5s, Nah, I wouldn't take that. I don't think it's worth it. You want to be putting this guy in combat, right? Making use of his crushing and his thunderous and his high speed. You don't really want to be shooting with him. So if you move, you're hitting on sixes, and it's just two shots. I don't know why you would. Why would you bother? Unless you, like, say, you put together a list and you've got 10 points you don't know what to spend it on, then maybe, yeah, take a punt on it. But me personally, I'd rather just buy Dwarven Ale and put it on one of my, like, Troll Hordes or something like that instead. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that range option on that. Speaking of options for the slasher, though, how about this for an option? Brutal, Strider, Fury, 3 extra nerve, +1 extra crushing strength, extra attacks, and all of that for 25 points. Now, would you take that upgrade? Yeah, of course you would. You'd be mad not to. But here's the good news. That upgrade does exist. It's called Pick a Giant instead. So yeah, that's my biggest problem with slashers. They're a poor man's giant, and I just think for an extra 25 points, you're getting an option that is infinitely better in the giant. I mean, look at that list of extra stuff you get with the giant, and it's just 25 points more. I suppose if you were really trying to trim the fat off your list, and you had to cut something out somewhere, you could downgrade from a giant to a slasher, and I have done that before. But that is the only time I fielded a slasher, and I just looked at it as just a more rubbish giant. And unfortunately, that's where slashers lie for me. Okay, so now we're on to the hero choices. And there are lots of choices in the Goblin army for heroes, but before we get onto them, I just want to talk about Flaggits first. Now, these guys are brilliant, right? They are inspiring, and they're 40 points. Now, inspiring is an absolutely crucial rule in Kings of War, because at the end of the day, sometimes a Kings of War game can literally just come down to the roll of a 2d6, right? Yeah, I mean, come on, we've all been involved in those games where, like, you know, one of your units has taken, like, 2 wounds from a shooting attacks, and your opponent just goes, bang, double sixes, and then routs a unit they had no business in routing. And it's just devastating, and that is what inspiring is there to stop. Things exactly like that. And as a Goblin player, you've got low nerve anyway, you want to be taking inspiring, and I think it's probably so underused in this game. People try to cram like awesome killy things into their lists, and it's one of those things that they just leave out on points, and you should never leave out inspiring, at least not in my experience anyway. I always field at least 2 inspiring models minimum, usually 3 if I can. Sometimes I come up against players and they've just got 2,000 points and there's 1 unit of inspiring. To me, that's just like, that's a massive error. Play more inspiring. And as a Goblin player, you've really got no excuse not to. Because at 40 points, I mean, God, just put in a Flaggit, for God's sake. If you take units like, armies like Forces of Nature, for example, they can't field in an inspiring model for less than 85 points. Now, that just hamstrings the army a lot, I reckon, and it's one of the things Goblins don't suffer from. Oh yeah, and by the way, since the Clash of Kings book and the item Loot of Insatiable Darkness, I think a Flaggit with loot is a very efficient and a very effective use of points. Pretty much every army puts like their standard bearer with loot in these days. That's just, yeah, field that. One Flaggit. It's literally the first thing you write in your army list. Flaggit, Loot of Insatiable Darkness. Right? Yeah, everyone? Okay, good. So on to the heroes proper then in Goblins. And first off, let's talk about what we don't have. As a Goblin player, one thing we don't have access to is those like individual, highly mobile, usually with flying or something like that, those individual characters who have like crushing strength or maybe thunderous that can get around the board and have a high impact on the game. I'm talking about things like, for example, if you play Basilia, a paladin on a dragon or a paladin on a griffin. If you play orcs, like a Crudger on a winged slasher, something like that. Most armies have access to something like that, a highly mobile character that can go around the board smashing into things. And I personally feel that those kind of things in Kings of War are very effective. That is one thing that Goblins just don't have. We don't have any crushing strength characters with a lot of attacks, like really elite characters like that. and we don't have access to flying at all. But I think that's a bit of a weakness in the Goblin list, definitely. And I do tend to ally in a lot of Orcs when I play Goblins, because that's one way you can get it. Now, I've always been, from playing tabletop games for years, I've always been an older Warhammer Fantasy player. So for me, Orcs and Goblins just go together, like, salt and pepper, cheese and toast, Orcs and Goblins, isn't it? So so I play Orcs a lot when I play Goblins. I ally in a couple of points at least, and I tend to ally in stuff like that, Crudges on a boar, because you just can't find it in the Goblin list. But let's talk about what we do have. So for Goblin heroes, you've got a big git and a king. Now these guys are essentially exactly the same. It's just the big git is just a cheaper, less effective version of the king. As you can see, like I said, we don't have any combat heroes, so these guys are range based. They got range attack of 4, and obviously they're both individual, so they're going to be hitting on 4s, even when they move, which is good because they got nimble. And yeah, for me, the king is probably the better way to go here, just because the big kit, with only 3 attacks, it's difficult to make that effective, because at the end of the day you are only hitting on 4s, so when you range, you're just simply not putting off enough shots to actually be worrying anything, I think. So I'd probably go for the king. I'd probably mount both of them on a flea bag as well. But when it comes to the king, 90 points, and then when you put them on a flea bag, 110 points, starts to get quite effective for something that's only got 5 shots. Sorry, it starts to get quite costly, I should say, for something that's only got 5 points. So I'm not really a big fan of both of these choices, to be honest, because I think the issue here is the fact that the flag git is still so cheap, right? The flag git's coming in at 40 points. So I think what most Goblin players do, if they want that inspiring, instead of taking a king and mounting him on a flea bag, they just take a flag git, mount him on a flea bag, and already you're saving yourself 50 points, and then give him something like Diadem of Dragonkind for the breath attacks, or something like a boomstick for like a really effective blast range attack. And then you're essentially getting the effectiveness of range from a king, and you're getting it from half the points, and you're probably getting a better shooting as well. So flag gits tend to just, because they are so much cheaper than both of these choices, they just tend to be picked instead. Because if you want that inspiring, why would you choose the king or the big git? I suppose you wouldn't really, I mean, don't get me wrong, flag gits to have less stats. They've only got a nerve of 8-10 instead. But if you choose a big git that's 9-11, it's just 1. The point is, if these things get shot at or they get charged, they're dead anyway, regardless, aren't they? And that's the problem with these two choices for me. To be honest, I think you can pick something that do exactly the same as these guys do, and if not more effectively, and just for cheaper in the flag git. That brings us on to the Wiz, and these things are absolutely great. A brilliant thing about Goblins is the fact they have access to Lightning Bolt, which a lot of armies either don't have access to, or they do have access, but it's incredibly expensive. So, for example, a Goblin Wiz has Lightning Bolt 3 for 45 points, and if you're playing Undead, a Necromancer is 85 points, and then you've got to pay 20 points for Lightning Bolt 3 as well. So you can see just how cheap it is in the Goblin list. For me, Lightning Bolt is far better than Fireball, just because it's got double the range and it's got piercing. Don't get me wrong, like when you do see Fireball, it tends to be in bigger numbers. Of Freets, for example, for Forces of the Abyss have a Fireball 20, which is huge, but that's them. In terms of Goblins, though, yeah, I like Lightning Bolt. I like the piercing, and the fact that it's so cheap in the Goblin list is a massive bonus. I tend to run at least one Wiz with the upgrade of Amulet, which is 20. I think it's 20 points actually. Is it 20 or 25? I can't remember. But anyway, that gives you like a 60-point model with Lightning Bolt 5, which is very effective. I find I always field at least one of those. I tend to field also Wiz with Bane Chant. Another serious bonus for Goblins is the fact that you can have a Bane Chant character for 45 and 15, which is 60 points. 60 points for a character with Bane Chant is, again, incredibly cheap. Most armies just don't have access to that. So, yeah, take a Wiz with Bane Chant, and And I took a flag gate with loot as well, so I've got 2 Bane chants usually. In terms of the Fireball upgrade, I'm not sure I would. I don't think I'd pay 15 points to swap Lightning Bolt 3 for Fireball 6. I don't think that's really a good use of points, to be honest. Because Fireball, again, is like half the range. It's not as forgiving. It's more, you have to be up in their face. So if I was going to, I'd probably mount him on a Fleabag, just so you got that increased mobility. And then, look, you're paying like 15 points for the Fleabag, 15 points for Fireball, and 45 points for the Wiz. That does start to get expensive. So that's probably why I'd stick with Lightning Bolt, to be honest. For Wind Blast, I don't tend to play a lot of Wind Blast. I have done before, though. And it is quite fun to play with, actually, to be honest. If you're going to take Wind Blast, I'd almost definitely recommend the Zephyr Crown, though, for 20 points. Because that Wind Blast 5 then goes up to Wind Blast 9, which makes it a lot more reliable and a lot more effective when it does go off. But yeah, Goblin Wizards, best part about these is they're cheap and very, very effective with lightning bolts. Field them. And again, the fact that you can give Inspiring Talisman to a wizard and say you take a Wiz with Bane Chant and Inspiring to give you another Inspiring bubble, just goes to show that why would you field the big git and the king? Because you've got a model here that can do better and do it cheaper. So it's just another nail in the coffin for those guys, really. But wizards, yeah, brilliant. So, Troll Bruisers. And I quite like these. I used to field the Troll Bruiser quite a lot, to be honest. It's the only way of getting any crushing strength from your hero choices. And it's crushing strength 3 as well, which is, it means you're wounding most things on 2s with this guy. Obviously, defense 6 being quite rare in the game. Unless you're playing dwarves, in which case it then seems to be everywhere, annoyingly. But anyway, that's dwarves. So, yeah, crushing 3 wounding stuff on 2s, 5 attacks hitting on 3s. So you can expect this guy to do between, like, say, 3 wounds there or thereabouts consistently. One thing I do like about this guy is the fact that he's not an individual, and yet he's got nimble. Now, thematically, that seems a bit dumb, because trolls aren't supposed to be nimble after all. But it does mean that you've got the mobility of an individual character, or very close to it, actually. But you still benefit from flanks and rear charges, which I think is really good. I like the design of this guy. And very often, I would get flank charges when I played this guy. Because obviously he inspires trolls only, you field him next to your trolls. I think you'd be quite hard-pressed to justify picking this unless you actually picked other trolls as well. So you field this guy next to your trolls to give them inspiring, and he's kind of like a support character in that if the trolls do get charged, this guy can then flank anything, or you just like charge in with your trolls. And yeah, very good like that. And I had quite a lot of success when I did field the Troll Bruiser. I haven't fielded one in a while. But I did like it when I did field him. Potential items for this guy: Banner of the Griffin, like I mentioned, to give your trolls inspiring. Maybe the, I forget the item's name, but that item that gives you +1 regen, to give this guy regen 4. That's quite good. Blade of Slashing is obviously a great potential pick, because you've only got those 5 attacks, so re-rolling one of them definitely helps. For me, though, the Troll Bruiser's biggest weakness is the fact that he does only inspire trolls. So if you say you've got 2 hordes of trolls, which is what I run, but say you've even only got 1, when it comes to deployment, you have to put them together, right? They've got to go hand in hand, and that can hamstring you sometimes. So if you only want inspiring for your trolls, you're probably better off just picking a Flaggit, because it saves you tons of points. And the fact that the Flaggit is more versatile as well, he can inspire other things. A Troll Bruiser off on his own, or picked without trolls, is kind of like you're paying points for inspiring that you can't use, which is kind of like, that's really annoying, really. So that brings us on to the last entry under Goblins, and this is our living legend, Magua and Jews. Now, obviously this model is kind of based on the Skarsnik and Goblin model from GW. So what has he got? Well, he is melee attack 3 with defense 4, with 4 attacks and 12-14 on the nerve, and he'll cost you 110 points. I'm not really a fan of this guy. I just think, okay, he's got crushing 2, but he's only got 4 attacks, so you can't kick out a tremendous amount of wounds. And then range-wise, yes, he's got lightning bolt 4, but it is only 4, And like, for example, if you were to pick a Wiz and give him the amulet, he can kick off lightning bolt 5. So I just think he's not really great in range, and he's not really great in combat. So he's kind of like jack of all trades, master of none, this guy, unfortunately. I'd prefer it if he was more points. Maybe if he was, say, upgraded to like 150 points and given Lightning Bolt 6, I think that could be cool. Or even if he was just given 6 attacks instead of 4, you know, he could be a bit more potent, because don't forget, he's an individual, so he's never going to get double attacks, triple attacks for flanks or anything like that. So yeah, not really great, unfortunately. So not exactly a living legend. It's a bit disappointing, this Goblin one. You know, things like ogres, they have Grok Agamok, and he's just fantastic. And then you've got, you know, loads like Basusu for the Abyssal Dwarfs. There's loads of living legends in Kings of War that, you know, really incentivize you to play them because they're really effective. And I just think Goblins, nah, we don't have it, unfortunately. So just on his special rule for a bit though. If your army includes Magua and Jews, a single Morbius pack in the army is no longer irregular. Now, what that essentially means is if you have a regiment of Morbius packs, then they're not irregular, so you do get your unlock. But obviously your unlock is this guy, right? Because he's a hero. So it's kind of like saying that if you pick this guy and have a Morbius pack regiment, he doesn't take up a hero slot. Which I suppose that's kind of cool thematically, but like I said, Goblins, they're not an army where you're really struggling for slots, because you field in multiple units, hordes of lots of things. So, you know, because your stuff is so cheap. So it kind of really makes no difference. You know, I've never been like, oh, I really need, you know, to field something, but I don't have the slots. It's not really an issue for Goblins. I suppose, like, I like the idea thematically of fielding this guy with, like, maybe 2 regiments of Morbius packs and just having him behind them, like, you know, kicking off lightning bolts and giving you that inspiring. But like I said, I often run 2 regiments of Morbius packs with a whiz behind them and give him Inspiring Talisman and Bane Chant, because Bane Chant in Morbius packs is really effective. So if this guy had Bane Chant, then yeah, I'd be like, wow, cool. I would field him. It's another way of just making him better, but, you know, yeah, he's a bit mediocre, isn't he? Unfortunately. So here we go, guys. This is an example of a 2,000 point Goblin list with no allies, just straight up Goblins. This is pretty close to what I play almost most games, you know, just different variations of this, really. Like cutting things out here and putting things in there, but it's mainly this list. It's like a basis, it's like a template, what I usually work from. I think this is a really nice, well-rounded list that can play against anything and in almost any scenario and still do well. It's got lots of crushing strength, which is nice. It's got some nice range shooting from lightning bolts. It's also got some very effective close shooting from war trombones. It's got 2 units of very fast cav. Yeah, it's really nice, I reckon. Let's just go through it top to bottom. So first things first, sharp sticks. I pretty much field these guys every game. I think Phalanx is amazing for dealing with flyers and dealing with cavalry. I split my sharp sticks into 2 regiments. Now, you can run them as a horde, you can run them as a legion, but I just think if you're going into a game where you don't know what you're playing against, definitely go for Phalanx, because it's worth a point, because Negating Thunderous can literally shut down some armies. The idea behind fielding 2 regiments instead of the horde or the legion is that you've got more drops, and you know, you can wait for your opponent to put down their cav, you can put these opposite, and they're pretty much, you know, it's a very effective tactic. 2 hordes of trolls. I would run 3 if I had 3, but I don't. I only have 2. Yeah, I love trolls. These guys are amazing. 2 Morbius packs. These guys are just so cheap. You've got to put them in 95 points, and you get crushing 1, and you get speed 6 nimble. Very effective. You can use them both as chaff if you want to, like, you know, shield your units off. You can maybe use these and the sharp sticks to do that, or you could just put them on the flank. You know, and maybe definitely put these with inspiring, though, I would say. Fleabag Riders, like I said, you don't have any access to flyers, but Fleabag Riders are fantastic with their speed 10 and nimble. Helm of the Ram is an auto include on at least one of them. I've given the other one fire roll because I was just 5 points short. Maybe even Brew of Haste is another good idea for the other one. You know, 22-inch charge is nothing to be sniffed at. But But yeah, like I said, you don't have access to flyers, so these guys are really good at projecting that 20-inch threat range, which is fantastic. War Trombones. I think for 65 points, these guys are just so effective. That's why I field 3. I field at least 2. I think 3 is even better. They are fantastic, and these guys always recoup their points for me. Always. Down onto the flag get with loot. Like I said, that guy's an auto-include, inspiring with Bane Chant for 60 points. Can't get wrong. And then on to wizards. 2 wizards I got in this list. One of them has the amulet for Lightning Bolt 5. I think for 70 points, kicking out Lightning Bolt 5 for 70 points is just, again, it's brilliant and very cheap. And then the other wizard has got the Bane Chant with an Inspiring Talisman. So there's 2 sources of Bane Chant in this list. I usually put one with the Trolls and one with Morbius packs or something like that. And what's really good is if you don't have a chance to Bane Chant anything in combat, you've always got a War Trombone close, you know. I mean, but trying to Bane Chant shooting attacks isn't very effective anymore since the nerfing Clash of Kings, but it's still, if you can't put it into combat, you've definitely got the option there to give a War Trombone piercing too, and that can be very effective. Troll Bruiser with Banner of the Griffin. Like I said, this guy is going to give you inspiring for your trolls, and Banner of the Griffin gives them that rallying. It just helps them with their low nerve again, which is, like I mentioned, a great benefit. And then 2 giants. These guys are just amazing. Just huge, like, tar pits for your enemy to deal with, having to put 19 wounds on them before they rout them, and under that defense 5, they're just brilliant. I usually field them in like the center or even out on the wing. Just, march them up, and almost anything can charge these guys. So, yeah, that's it. 2,000 points. Really good. How many inspire? We got 1, 2, 3. There we go. 3 inspiring bubbles. Yeah, don't leave out inspiring. Like I mentioned, this list has got 3 inspiring bubbles, which is brilliant. And look at the best thing about this list. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 drops on deployment, which means you are almost always going to out-deploy your opponent. I think the average in 2,000 points is about 12, 13, maybe even 14 in my experience. They got a lot of stuff. 17 drops is huge. If you want to be really obnoxious about it, try and put in the scrying gem onto one of these guys and make your opponent deploy D3 plus 1. But that's just rude, I think. Yeah, so, deployment is not going to be an issue for you, which is another brilliant thing about this army. And what else? Yeah, I put Banner of the Griffin there on the Troll. If you wanted a bit more shooting, maybe give him the Diadem of Dragonkind for breath attacks. I think that's another definite option. Maybe squeezing another flag git with Boomstick. That could be another option for putting in a bit more range, a bit more shooting. You got lots of crushing strength in there, which is good with the Trolls and the Giants. So yeah, a really well-rounded list. I think you're definitely going to have fun playing this, and maybe more importantly as well, your opponent is going to have fun playing it as well. It's good for friendlies, it's good for tournaments. It's not cheesy, it's not dirty in any way like that. It's just a very strong, very effective list. So there we go, guys. There's a very long and very thorough, complete overview of the entire Goblin list for Kings of War. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.